Good evening, everybody. I am Rick Wilson. Welcome to the strategy session. I am joined tonight by my colleague, Stuart Stevens, the great, the one, the only Stuart Stevens. We are going to talk with a special guest tonight, David Pepper. I know you're going to love it because David is
very special guest.
Yes, a very special guest. Dave is one of the smartest guys in American electoral politics, and he is racking up some amazing pro-democracy successes in Ohio and beyond. So he's a Democratic strategist. He's author of several books, including Saving Democracy, a user's manual for every American. David, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
I'm so excited to be back with you guys. Thank you.
Well, folks, as you may have heard, I went to Iowa this weekend like a madman, wearing essentially more heavy-duty clothing than I've ever worn in my life, including like near the Arctic Circle. And what I saw on the ground was kind of what we've been expecting. Trump has a stranglehold on the party. In the lowest turnout election in Iowa in a very long time, he managed to get 56,000 white evangelicals to come out and vote for him. So, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what the night means, because for me, Trump is actually less interesting than DeSantis and Haley. And I want to talk through about your take on both their campaigns in Iowa, and then any next steps you think they could possibly make to try to maintain some liability going forward. So, Stuart, I'll start with you.
Look, I think it was the best case scenario for Trump. Yes, it was low turnout, but it's incredible. No one has ever won by more than 13 points. And to get to win by 30 points and north of 50.
Right.
I mean, that is really extraordinary. And when you think about it is a true statement. It sounds like a punchline to a joke, but it's a true statement. Ron DeSantis was doing better before he spent $150 million.
That's correct.
That is a true statement. We forget.
That's a true statement.
I was going back and looking at the Des Moines Register polls, and there was one in March of last year in which there was, Trump's fading, DeSantis moving up, well positioned. One of the things I think it shows is something you've been saying for a long time, Rick, because you know these people best, that the folks who are running Trump's campaign are much higher quality. They're putting together a professional organization.
Yep.
And Seltzer, the Des Moines Register, said that Trump had a precinct captain in every precinct, and there's like 1,700 precincts. That's hard to do. And I think it really is a warning sign for what they're going to be facing in the general.
I think that's right. David, what about you?
Well, interesting. The one thing, as Stuart says that, one thing that was fascinating to me in 2016 was how poorly organized the Trump campaign was.
Exactly.
I would literally go to I remember I would always want to see what it looked like. I'd go to the Toledo headquarters of the Trump campaign. There was nothing there. They literally, and I started taking photos and tweeting it out. They started putting posters over the windows so we would no longer be able to see how empty they were. So
I remember that.
Yeah, they were so embarrassingly empty. So that is a little bit worrisome. Stuart, the contrast that you just described, if they were organized, I had no basis of knowing that in Iowa versus what I saw in 2016, which was the sheer power of the Trump brand, but it wasn't organized, and they still obviously won Ohio. But I would say, the lesson is, I think DeSantis from the very beginning has just been a terrible candidate. I mean, himself. There's no way to paper that over. There's no way to cover that up. I mean, I had a nightmare this morning memory of the Top Gov, that Top Gov ad. I mean, he couldn't pull that off. I just think he's a
you mean putting your candidate in a weird shaped military helmet might not work
exactly.
out?
That doesn't work for either side.
No.
And then I think the broader I think Nikki Haley at moments has looked far more talented, I think, in debates and other times. But at some point, if you're running the overwhelming favorite, you actually have to look like you want to beat them by being negative about them. And You're not going to catch people. You're not going to win over their voters by basically saying you think they're pretty good or even better than that, or covering up every time they step in it, which is based, when you promise to pardon people, when every single time he's indicted, you call it political, you're basically affirming why all the people already support them. So, I will say, and we may disagree on this, you guys have been more on the ground there. I do think I'm surprised that DeSantis and Haley totaled in the 40s. I honestly do think, like, if I'm the Biden campaign, if I'm another group, I'm thinking, okay, how can I take that mid 40s and carve out of it enough people in the general that you win against Trump? Because I think that's a big enough number. And the polling around Haley was the more interesting one, where you had more and more, I would call them country over party people. So right. I do think that gives you some room to get, going back to Ohio for a second. The reason we had such a good year last year was because Kasich and Taft and others said vote no on one in August.
That's
and
right.
Enough Republicans joined Democrats and libertarians too to vote no. So I think your goal is, how do you carve out from the 40-something percentage that voted for Haley and DeSantis enough of those voters to vote for Biden in November? And I think Ohio showed last year that's actually doable. It's exactly how we had such decisive victories in August and November.
I think that's right. And I think that the next logical question is, so it's the worst case scenario for Nikki, the best case scenario for Trump. DeSantis is broke, so he comes out of this how in whatever sort of twilight zone he's in. What does this race mean for Joe Biden? And I do think the exit poll showing a lot of Nikki's voters are willing to jump to Biden, or willing to at least listen to Biden, is important and probably relevant. But where do you guys see the outcome of this first big contest affecting Biden?
David?
Yeah, I'll just say I've been frustrated by the last 9 months, because I think people have been in denial that Trump would be the candidate. At least there was such an incentive to hype up the debates and all that. To me, it's been clear as a bell that this would be Biden versus Trump again. No one really was even engaging in a way that would beat Trump. And Mike, I think that helps Biden in the end. I think it's right now it's sort of a hypothetical race,
right.
A hypothetical about who's going to be running. That makes the polls kind of screwy. It makes people get demoralized or panic. And I think the clearer it is, this is really, in the end, a choice between Biden and Trump. I think that clarity probably gives Biden earlier. I just saw the reports you have. They raised a lot of money in recent days, et cetera, et cetera. I just think it's going to force Americans to see, as much as people may not have wanted that to be the choice, that is the choice. It's more exposure to how crazy Trump's acting every day. And I think in the end, that's got to lift Joe Biden. By the way, he needs to have a smart enough campaign to take advantage of that, not hope that people naturally just pick him over Trump, but be smart enough to take advantage of what I think is a clear contrast to be made.
Yeah, I think Stuart.
Yeah, Rick, I one of the interesting stats there was the percentage. I think it was 68% of the Trump voters thought that that Trump had won the election. So there is a mathematical formula for people who didn't get 420 on the SAT math like I did, that you could work out that if 68% of his base vote is those who believe that Trump actually won the election, and you could work that out as to what that would give you a number that is close to his base in the country. And I don't think that number is 68% of the people that think that the country is, that Trump really won. That number is probably like 33, 34%. So, that's kind of a gateway drug to Trump, that if you believe, now there's a certain logic to that. If you believe that the guy that you're voting for was illegally denied being president, you might want to vote for him again. But again, it's like, once you understand that aliens built the pyramids, a lot of things fall into place. And it's just one little flaw in that, So I'm with David. I think the sooner this becomes a two-up match, and we talked about this before, but I was very impressed with the way the Biden campaign seized on the January 6th anniversary to lay down a marker on democracy.
Right.
So, I think it was a good night for Joe Biden. When you look at all of that together, the people who voted for Trump were very intensely motivated, but
Yep.
you could put everybody who voted in that caucus inside David's Ohio State Stadium, and you'd still have some empty seats to sell. So,
absolutely. Well, so the turnout numbers were historically low. How do each of you interpret those low numbers? And I will say, I think the weather was not an inconsiderable factor, but my personal theory, based on not some anecdotal evidence from out there, was in some ways it was just a sense of resignation that Trump was going to have it more than the weather. But I'd love to get both of your thoughts on that, David.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there. I assume the weather played some role. It's pretty cold here, and it's nothing like what it was like in Iowa. We don't have the snow on the ground. But I will say, if you look back over the last year, and I'm just going to pick on my Ohio experience, the appeal to the extreme that we saw play out, and it happened again in Virginia too. Like and we literally heard the evangelical community has a massive turnout plan to win in August, and they're going to win on this abortion battle in November, and so, like I always do, we get instant urban county turnout. But I've learned, and you guys have been on the other side of this at times, you don't really know what's going on in Ohio unless you start driving to those rural precincts, walking in the door, and saying, hey, what's the turnout like? And I'll put my Bengals hat on so I kind of just don't look political. I just ask.
Right.
And it's been anemic. In Claremont County, in Brown County, in the red rural areas where they needed really good turnout, let alone suburbs where they need really good turnout to win in August and November, it just wasn't there. And all the appeal to the extreme message literally didn't seem to turn their voters out. So I don't know if this is consistent with that, but I think that's what happened in Virginia. I think our side, although it's sometimes been under the radar, has been more energized out of concern about post-Dobbs ramifications on lives, democracy, and that seems to be turning out more of our voters than the sort of hyper-extreme messages that they ran trying to win over, voters or scare them into voting in Ohio last August, November. So maybe this is consistent with that as well. I think we'll know better when we have some primaries that aren't the uniqueness of a caucus, and maybe perhaps a little bit more comfortable weather to see if it's a trend. But it definitely has been a trend in the last year. Going back to Wisconsin, the Supreme Court special, going to August in Kansas, like in 22, like it's been this very clear pattern that our side has been more energized than their side, despite them going all in on the messages to get their people out.
And the polling backs that up. If you look at the numbers on abortion, there's always been 60+% of the people were pro-choice, right? Considered themselves pro-choice,
right?
But it used to be the intensity was on the anti-abortion side, and now that's flipped. The same with guns. It used to be the intensity was all on the Second Amendment NRA side, and now that's changed. And I think that's something that we got to lose sight of because the top line numbers haven't changed that much. But inside those numbers, the intensity of people who are motivated to go and vote. I mean, like if you did a regression analysis of why are you going to vote? And it makes sense. You want to vote because something was taken away from you, a fundamental right that we thought was ingrained in the Constitution. And you're tired of seeing kids get shot in school. So you're more worried about that than defending yourself from Red Dawn with your local militia. So I think those are big trends.
Yeah, but by the way, one other example was all these Moms of Liberty school board candidates going down in flames.
Yeah,
I'm sitting in I'm in a rec center of a suburban Hamilton County suburb that used to be red. There was really high turnout in the particular communities with those school board races, up to 60%. A community called Madeira, where
that's an incredible number.
you had insurrectionists from January 6th running for school board, and the turnout was sky high, and they absolutely rejected these people 3-1. Same kind of trend.
That I think in some ways half the Republican strategy these days is to scare the hell out of Democrats that they've got more intensity on their side, and they just have not. You're absolutely right, both of you, on that front. One thing I wanted to talk about also is, if you guys were to put your political hat on and look at what Trump did last night in his speech, I thought it was very telling that he gave a much more controlled speech than normal. It concerns me. I don't like it. But he mentioned he praised his own campaign team, which shocked me. It wasn't just a stream of weird verbal diarrhea, which shocked me. Where do you see his path ahead? If you were Chris LaCivita, beyond the craziness he's doing right now, what would you be doing? How would you be running Trump world right now?
David?
I mean, one, to me, the question is, can he control himself or be controlled? I don't know the answer, because I think often when he most helps us is when he truly just is off the rails, probably despite everyone telling him not to be. I mean, he goes out and says he wants to be a dictator. He tries to walk it back. Clearly someone told him that. He can't even help himself. But I do, I didn't see much of the speech, but I praised his opponents to some degree. Like, yeah, that's smart. Going back to the Ohio experience, I think he was quite smart to avoid getting into the issue one messes here. I think that was an instinct of not going as right-wing on abortion ban 6 weeks as even most Republicans in Ohio did. So in some ways, his instinct has been smarter on that than some Republicans who are running around Ohio trying to pass things that are 80-20 underwater or something. So, I mean, obviously that's a path to figure out how to seem non-extreme in the fall, because we've seen this, again, going back to as much as we worry about Trump, there's actually been a heck of a winning streak for democracy going back to November of 22. Every single election-denying Secretary of State in a swing state lost. People don't want election deniers in office. If Trump,
we were hunting them down like wild animals.
Yeah, and they did worse. They did worse on the ballots than the other Republicans in the same state. Kerry Lake, Mastriano, and the Secretaries of State. And if you're smart and you're Trump, you're looking at that thinking, I can't do this in a general. And the question is, can he? I mean, it's very hard to back out of the big lie and all this stuff. But what can he do to not scare off people in a way that we've seen, again, counter-historical Democratic wins, flipping state houses, winning Secretary of State offices, throttling election deniers in Arizona and Pennsylvania, other states. Obviously, if he's on the edge of that extreme like those candidates were, I think he loses. And my guess is the smart people in that campaign know that. But can they control him? I doubt they can. They certainly will try.
I doubt they can over time.
Right. Guys, just think about this. A former president of the United States was in court today for the second time in the same court that found him guilty of sexual assault, which the judge did clarify that meant he raped E. Jean Carroll. And, I mean, it's not the lead story in the news. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I just go back to 2000 inside the Bush campaign. Really, the only message that actually worked for us was restoring honor and dignity in the White House. And how is it that party is now out there supporting a man who has been found guilty of sexual assault? It's just so unimaginable to me. And I don't believe that this is where America is.
Yeah.
Do you guys see this? Do you guys see this election as a high turnout or a low turnout model?
High.
I assume high, very high.
I'm assuming high also.
Yeah.
Does that help or hurt Biden in your mind at this point?
I think helps.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think Trump's already maxed out his unlikelies.
Yeah.
His
the
one
more
twos.
we see there's some pretty consistent polling right now. A majority say he should be disqualified, whether you believe in the legal argument. A majority of Americans say that. A majority think go down the list. Mid-30s support him.
Right.
So yeah, the closer the turnout is to reflecting that broad sense, I think it certainly helps Biden.
For sure. Well, David, I know we're getting short on time, and I wanted to jump to a topic that you are very smart about. Talk to us a little bit about the Voting Rights Act right now, and about some of the legislative and court challenges around that, and why that is so important going forward.
Well, I mean, I honestly believe that I understand why it didn't happen, but I think if we don't correct it, the lack of being able to have repassed the Voting Rights Act in the 2-year window we had will be seen like some late 1800s years as a terrible miss that it didn't get done for whatever reason it didn't get done. So my hope is that it is something that, as we talk about democracy is not only us beating Trump, although obviously we have to beat Trump to preserve democracy.
Right.
It's in states and federally protecting voters, ending gerrymandering, running more broadly to hold extremists accountable. And my hope is, and again, I don't speak for anyone but myself here, that if we manage, knock on wood, this is a long shot, to win the Senate, the House, and the White House, that priority one, given the chance again, we reenact the Voting Rights Act, and we lock into place anti-gerrymandering reforms so that no one, Republican or Democrat, does it in states. Again, so much of the brokenness of American politics is coming out of the fact that everyone from Mike Johnson down to most state legislators have never been in a real election their entire lives. Right. They literally, personally do not know democracy. Mike Johnson, uncontested first state house race, uncontested second state house race, 3 congressional runs winning by 40 or 35%, next run uncontested. This guy doesn't know democracy. He's scared of it. And he represents a whole generation of politicians. That is the cause of so much of what's broken. And there's the Supreme Court said, we're not going to fix it, but Congress can. And I think the next time there's an opportunity, let's go fix it. My hope is that is one, if Democrats manage to run the table, which should be the goal, although it's tough, get that done right away. Don't wait a year and a half before bringing it up like we did last time. It's too late.
Yep. Well, David, I know you are on the clock here, so we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining the show tonight. Really appreciate your wisdom and your insight as always. Folks, follow David. David, where can they find you on social media?
So I'm at David Pepper on Twitter. I'm on Substack, so look for me at David Pepper. And I'm on other stuff too, but those are the places where I'm most active. Instagram. I'm trying to figure out how to get people to watch TikTok videos, but apparently I'm the wrong generation to figure that out.
I'm told there was dancing, and I just don't do dancing.
I recently actually created a partnership with a very talented editorial cartoonist from Cincinnati.
So let's show a couple of those.
Yeah, I love these.
So this was our first one.
Perfect.
Which I love this one. And this guy's name is Kevin Necessary. He's a very talented editorial cartoonist from the Inquirer for years. One of the things that we're losing in journalism is also the heart of the paper. Terrific. And so stories are important, but if you stop having editorials and editorial cartoons and columnists, there's no perspective and nothing really cuts through. So Kevin and I have decided to create a partnership trying to get out different types of content, trying to see what goes viral. I'm someone, a good editorial cartoon can capture the emotion of something often more than any column could in a way you never forget. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to create as much content as we can. That's all on Twitter and my Substack as well.
I'm reading a book about William Hogarth right now, the great English engraver and prototypical editorial cartoonist from the 1750s to the 1790s. And it's absolutely true. They tell a story in a few strokes and images that's very hard to replicate otherwise. Well, David, thank you again for joining us tonight. We look forward to having you on the show again soon.
Awesome.
Stuart and I are going to take a couple questions, but we'll let you get going. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, David. Next time when David's back, I really want to get his analysis of when is the next time and how is it going to happen that Ohio is going to vote for a Democratic president?
I
think it's more doable than we think.
I suspect two things are going on right now. The outmigration from Ohio of non-college whites to Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Texas has altered those states kind of profoundly. And I think we may see a reset demographically sooner than they think, because it was a state that was top heavy in the age pyramid, and I think a lot of those people have come here where it's warm and they can die in the sun. So let's do a couple of audience questions real quick, and then we will call it a night. Where's the no labels fuckery figure here?
We don't have an opinion on that.
No labels. I have no idea.
We haven't thought about that much.
No, it is a crazy, weird spot that we're in right now with no labels. I don't know, how many more times we have to say they're going to take votes away from Joe Biden. I don't know how many more times we have to say they're funded by Republicans. It's one of the factors in this election that it would be a lot nicer an election, given the existential threat of Trump and his movement, if we didn't have to worry about a third-party Republican-driven operation pulling votes away from the president. So, Stuart, why don't you take this one? How much difference will Trump's better organization make this time?
I was doing a little TV thing earlier today, and I was on with a guy named Dave Carney. Dave Carney from New Hampshire. Rick knows him well. He is the guy who you went to organize New Hampshire for you if you're a Republican. There was usually a bidding war for Dave. I first encountered him, believe it or not, in the Dole campaign. We were running against Buchanan. And he was saying that he thought that Trump was much better organized than Nikki Haley or DeSantis in New Hampshire, which actually kind of shocked me because Nikki Haley's backed by the governor. Right. And I think what you're getting into is this increasing disconnect between where governors who are non-Trump governors are out of touch with their own party. And you see that phenomenon like Larry Hogan in Maryland couldn't pick the state party chairman. Charlie Baker in Massachusetts couldn't pick the state party. Phil Scott in Vermont couldn't pick it. But I still would have thought that, Sununu is a big name in New Hampshire, and I would have thought that they'd be better organized. So I know for a fact in 2016, on the ground a lot in New Hampshire in the primary, Trump was horribly organized. It was just sort of like David was talking about in Ohio. So I think the bottom line is that it's very troubling, and it should be taken very seriously. And say what you will about Trump, but he's proving to be a learning political organism.
Right. He may be a mutant, but he's mutating in a way that makes him more powerful rather than less.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, Stuart, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We are we going to show that ad on this show? Did we decide to do that or not? Sam, producer Sam. I don't know if we can or not. I don't know if we queued it up. Well, no, we are not. Well, folks, go to the Lincoln Project YouTube channel and look at the ad, God Made a Dictator. It has got
fantastic ad.
It is blowing things up. It just aired on Joy Reid a few minutes ago. And also check out the Lincoln Project podcast. Check out my podcast, The Enemies List, and also Joe Trippi's podcast, That Trippy Show. Also on Resolute Square, The Zero Line. All of these podcasts, folks, are out there really diving into one key message and mission, and that's the promotion of democracy here and around the world. So we hope you give it a look and give it a listen, and we'll see you again next time here on The Strategist.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks, folks.